Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. In today's video, we are going to be going over the Storm Prediction Center's day 1 through 8 Storm Prediction Center outlook, severe weather outlook specifically. Um, Currently, day 1, there are two slight risks of severe weather, one in Iowa and one going from Indiana into extreme northwestern Ohio into southwest Michigan. We also have four other marginal risks. One in going from Canada to Montana and the Dakotas. One from the Texas and Oklahoma panhandles back into Missouri and Arkansas. One in the Gulf Coast from the Texas Gulf Coast all the way into Florida and Georgia and even portions of extreme southern South Carolina. And then one in the Delmarva vicinity and extreme southern New Jersey near Atlantic City and Cape May. So there is a lot to talk about on day 1. However, we need to address the elephant in the room here. A moderate risk of severe thunderstorms is forecast for Wednesday, which is tomorrow. So it says an outbreak of severe thunderstorms is expected across portions of Illinois and Indiana on Wednesday. Intense tornadoes, swaths of damaging wind gusts to 80 miles per hour, and hail up to 2.5 inches in diameter are expected. So that is the elephant in the room. We're going to address more of the elephant in the room later, but first we have to talk about the day 1, because the day 1, there's a lot to talk about. First things first, we have a 5% tornado threat from Indiana into Michigan and a 2% tornado threat extending from the Chicago metro all the way down into central Illinois, into central Indiana, into northwest Ohio, and into Lake Michigan and southwest and southern Michigan. And then we have a general 2% risk of tornadoes extending from Texas all the way into the Floridian Panhandle, southern Georgia, and extreme South Carolina. So then we have a wind risk, a 5% risk of wind, a 15% risk of wind extending from Indiana into northwest Ohio into southwest Michigan, and then a 5% risk of wind extending from central Illinois into Indiana, Ohio, Lake Erie, and Lake Michigan, and southern Michigan, and even central Michigan. And then we have 5 other risks, one in Montana and the Dakotas, one in Iowa and Illinois, one from, what do you call it? Texas and Oklahoma panhandles back into Missouri and Arkansas, one on the Gulf Coast, and one in the Delmarva/New Jersey vicinity. That's the wind risk, and then the hail risk, it's just 5 regions. There's a 15% hail risk for Iowa, and a 15% hail risk for Indiana and Southwest Michigan. And then you have the 5% as well. You have a 5% again from Montana to the Dakotas, one from the Texas panhandles and Oklahoma panhandle into Missouri and Arkansas, and one in the Delmarva vicinity. So it's very scattered all over the United States. So, yeah. So, summary. Severe thunderstorms are possible today and tonight across multiple parts of the Midwest, as well as on a more isolated basis across the Gulf Coast, southern Central Plains, and northern plains. The Midwest and the Great Lakes. A low amp shortwave trough will amplify and spread east-southeastward over the Great Lakes today. Uh, excuse me. While overall moisture content will remain modest, steady low-level moistening is expected ahead of a surface low and cold front and south of a north-northeastward shifting warm front. This moistening and isolation or insulation beneath a developing mid-level dry slot should support a corridor of modest destabilization as the mid-level cold pool, including the 500 millibar temperatures around -18 to -20 degrees Celsius, overspreads the region this afternoon. This environment should become sufficient for a developing broken band of strong to severe low-topped thunderstorms, including supercells posing a risk for severe hail and damaging winds, and possibly a couple of tornadoes from mid-afternoon through early evening. Iowa and upper Midwest, late tonight. A categorical slight risk upgrade has been introduced for what should be a steadily increasing late-night pre-dawn potential for large hail, at least on isolated bases. This potential should tend to focus across parts of central and eastern Iowa. Exact details of timing and spatial extent of the cap erosion are a bit uncertain, but will defer to a significantly strengthening southwesterly low-level jets and east-southeastward affecting elevated mixed layer and ample source region elevated buoyancy regarding concerns for large hail. This will be as robust This will be as robust, warm, moist advection develops and initial falls arrive into the region early Wednesday with increasing elevated convection probable. Southern Central Plains. Near ahead of the stalling front, boundary layer moistening may support convective available potential energy on the order of 1 to 2,000 joules per kilogram across parts of southern Kansas into southwest Missouri, where mid-level inhibition may remain weak enough through late afternoon and early evening to allow for isolated and widely scattered thunderstorm development. Sufficient vertical shear could support supercell development, and additional severe thunderstorm development, at least on an isolated basis, is plausible further west southwest later in the afternoon and early evenings across across northern Oklahoma and southern Kansas into the Texas Panhandle, northern Great Plains into Midwest. Models suggest that a corridor of fairly deep boundary layer mixing will precede the vigorous shortwave trough digging across and east-southeast of the Canadian and northern United States Rockies. Associated mid-level forcing for ascent will contribute to sufficient destabilization to support scattered thunderstorm development with the potential to produce some hail and scattered strong to severe surface gusts late this afternoon and evening. Delmarva into the coastal mid-Atlantic. Some strong and locally severe thunderstorms could occur tonight as convection develops near and north of a near coastal offshore surface low and northward advancing warm front. Storms will tend to be elevated inland, but modest buoyancy and strong unidirectional shear through the cloud-bearing layer could yield some hail and/or gusty winds. And Gulf Coast finally. Strengthening westerly flow, including 20 to 40 knots in the 850 to 500 millibar layer, is anticipated, regionally coincident with a moist boundary layer. As diurnal heating and destabilization occurs, this may support modestly organizing convection, perhaps transient supercell structures, posing a risk for damaging wind gusts and perhaps a brief tornado or two. Alright, now we get into the big stuff. The moderate risk. There is a moderate risk from central Illinois into northwest Indiana, and it's it's driven by a 15% risk, double hatched risk of tornadoes. Yeah, that's not good. But first things first, we also have an enhanced risk from Missouri into Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, and parts of western Ohio. Then we have the slight risk extending from Kansas into Missouri, back up through Iowa and Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Lake Erie, Ohio, northern Kentucky, Indiana, Illinois, and all that good stuff. So, and Lake Michigan as well. And then the marginal risk extends from Oklahoma into Kansas, into Missouri, Iowa, blah. So let's start that again. Iowa into Kansas, into Missouri, into Iowa, into Minnesota, into Wisconsin, into Michigan, into western Pennsylvania, western and northwestern West Virginia, Ohio, northern and central Kentucky, Indiana, Illinois, and then blah, all that good stuff. And then again, a marginal risk also in the Gulf Coast, from Texas to Louisiana to Mississippi to Alabama. Uh, again, like I said, the moderate risk is driven by a 15% hatched risk of tornadoes, double hatched, excuse me, and then there's a 10% hatched risk in the yellow, a 5% hatched risk in the orange, and a 2% without a hatching in the green. So if you live in any of these colored areas on the map, you need to be prepared tomorrow for some potentially significant tornadoes, especially if you live in the dashed or lined regions. And then there's a wind risk. The wind risk goes from Missouri and Iowa into Illinois, Indiana, and Western Ohio. That's kind of what makes the enhanced risk. And the hatching goes back from Kansas all the way into southern Michigan and northwest Ohio. The yellow is the yellow and the brown is the brown. So if the yellow is the 15%, the brown is the 5%, and the red is the 30%. And we have a wind risk in the Gulf Coast. And then cool, a hail risk from the Missouri, Illinois, Iowa triad into, and then that's it for the 30%. The 15% goes from is the yellow region from Kansas into back into Minnesota into Ohio, making a triangle basically. And then the 5% is the brown, goes from Oklahoma to Minnesota to Ohio, and then that's yeah. And then the hatching, the stippled region, the dashed lines are where hail can potentially be significant. So let's do this. Um, there's a moderate risk of severe thunderstorms across portions of central Illinois into northwest Indiana. I'm not going to read the summary because I actually read it earlier in this video, so if you caught that, great. Midwest. A volatile environment for severe thunderstorms is expected to develop across portions of the Midwest from Iowa and Missouri into Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio on Wednesday, with significant all-hazards severe weather expected. A mid and upper level shortwave trough initially over the northern plains early Wednesday will pivot southeast across the upper Midwest through 0Z and much of the Great Lakes by 12Z Thursday. 0Z is 7 p.m. Central, 12Z is 7 a.m. Central. As this occurs, particularly intense mid and upper level flow, especially by June standards, is forecast to increase over the region. A 60 to 80 knot westerly 500 millibar jet stream will overspread much of the Midwest through the evening before increasing further during the nighttime hours. Furthermore, an impressive southwesterly 850 millibar low-level jet around 50 to 60 knots will be oriented from Kansas into Iowa at 12Z. This feature will spread east and northeast across Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio through evening. Interestingly, the core of the low-level jet may be somewhat displaced to the east of the core worm sector expected to develop across the mid-Mississippi Valley vicinity, perhaps tied to an early-day shortwave impulse ejecting across Iowa and Illinois during the morning. Nevertheless, 40 to 55 knot 850 millibar winds will persist even across the worm sector, even as the core of the low-level jet overspreads the Ohio Valley towards lower Michigan during the afternoon. At the surface, an elongated area of low pressure will extend from North Dakota to the mid-Missouri Valley vicinity Wednesday morning. A warm front will extend from northwest Iowa southeastward across central Illinois, while a cold front extending from eastern Nebraska into western Kansas occurs. As this system progresses east through the day, the warm front will lift northward into northern Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio, and upper 60s to near 70 dew points are expected. Aided by steep mid-level lapse rates and cooling aloft, mixed layer convective available potential energy will approach 2,500 to 3,500 joules per kilogram. The latitude of the warm front continues to be a point of uncertainty. Most forecast guidance depicts morning advection regimes moving eastward across Iowa and northern Illinois and Indiana. It is uncertain if this will suppress the northward advancement of the warm front. However, the ultimate position of the warm front will have large impacts on where potential, particularly concerning strong to intense tornado potential, may eventually develop, as storm motion will likely be along the boundary rather than across the boundary, allowing for potentially fast-moving, long-track supercells interacting with the warm front and remaining within the favorable warm sector. As the surface cold front develops east, additional convection will develop along the boundary by late afternoon and early evening from far southeast Iowa into northern Missouri and eastern Kansas. Initial supercells along this boundary will pose an all-hazards risk, including very large hail, strong tornadoes, and damaging wind gusts. With time, this convection may develop into a line propagating east-southeast, and if a linear mesoscale convective system develops, swaths of damaging wind gusts will be possible. In general, given the strength of the background flow fields, damaging wind potential could be significant regardless of storm mode. Furthermore, even storms developing north of the warm front could still produce severe wind gusts given the large, most unstable convective available potential energy. Fast storm motion also and intense flow just above the surface. Favorable low-level shear will also support continued tornado potential even within a linear storm mode via embedded supercell structures and mesovortex generation. Large to very large hail potential is most likely early in storm development and where supercells are most likely to remain discrete. Northern Missouri, far southeast Iowa, and north central Illinois. Gulf Coast. Isolated strong gusts are possible in association with a tropical disturbance moving eastward across or along the Gulf Coast. See the tropical weather outlook from the National Hurricane Center for more information. So cool. Yeah, that's it for the day 2. If you live in the red, the yellow, or the orange tomorrow, please be prepared. Please, 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 please be prepared for strong tornadoes, large hail, and damaging winds. This will also translate east into the mid-Atlantic and New England regions, and also back into the Ohio Valley and the southeast. Going from the New York Metro and Long Island all the way into New Jersey, Pennsylvania, the Delmarva vicinity, Western Virginia, Ohio, Kentucky, and Virginia, West Virginia, and Tennessee, The marginal risk spreads all the way from Maine to the Gulf Coast to the Texas and Oklahoma Panhandle, so it's going to be a lot. So, summary: isolated to scattered severe thunderstorms will be possible from Kentucky to the mid-Atlantic. Damaging wind gusts will be the main hazard with this activity. Synopsis: a series of embedded mid-level shortwave troughs will migrate through broad upper troughing and strong southwesterly deep layer flow from the Great Lakes to the northeast. At the surface, low pressure over southern Ontario will develop northeast along the St. Lawrence Valley, and a trailing cold front will extend southwest from the lower Great Lakes to northern Oklahoma and the Texas Panhandles during the morning. This front will sag south and southeast through the period, becoming oriented from the mid-Atlantic to central Texas by Friday morning. A very moist air mass will reside south of the front, particularly from the southern plains to the mid-Atlantic. Moderate to strong destabilization will develop across parts of the plains into the Ohio Valley, with more modest instability with northeastward extent into the mid-Atlantic and northeast. Ohio Valley to the mid-Atlantic and northeast. Very strong west to southwesterly mid and upper level flow is expected to reside across the northeast on Thursday, decreasing with southwest extent into the Ohio Valley. Convection may be ongoing near the surface front and within the broad warm advection regime ahead of the boundary Thursday morning, especially across the northeast. This will likely temper destabilization across portions of Pennsylvania and New York and points northward. Nevertheless, intense deep layer flow will still support strong to severe wind gusts with the convection through early evening. Richer boundary layer moisture will be in place from Tennessee and Kentucky into the mid-Atlantic, fostering strong destabilization. Clusters and line segments will pose a risk for mainly damaging gusts. Oklahoma and Texas to the mid-south. A belt of strong instability is forecast ahead of the southward sagging cold front Thursday afternoon. This area will be further removed from stronger mid to upper southwesterly flow, but ample instability, modest effective shear, and high precipitative water values supporting water-laden downdrafts will result in a marginal severe risk for damaging winds within the thunderstorm clusters and bands. And in the southeast, the remnants of a tropical disturbance is expected to migrate across portions of the Gulf Coast on Thursday. A very moist and moderately unstable air mass will be in place. The remnant low may serve to locally enhance vertical shear, resulting in an accompanying risk for strong wind gusts, perhaps even a tornado or two. So that's day 3. Now, day 4 is kind of boring. Day 6 is boring. Day 7 is boring. And day 8 is boring. But day 5, there's a 15% from Nebraska and Kansas to Missouri and Iowa. And that's really it. Day 4, Friday to the Carolinas. A very moist air mass will be in place across the Carolinian vicinity on Friday. Medium range guidance varies in the evolution of a surface front across the region. However, widespread convection is likely to be ongoing Friday morning somewhere across the southeast. This will temper downstream destabilization, and severe potential is very uncertain. Saturday, Central Plains. Upper ridging over the plains will break down on Saturday as an upper shortwave ejects from the central Rockies towards the mid-Missouri Valley. At the same time, lee surface low development over the central high plains will strengthen south-southeasterly low-level flow, and rich Gulf moisture will quickly stream northward across portions of Kansas and Nebraska. Moderate to strong destabilization amid strengthening west-northwesterly flow aloft will support the severe thunderstorm development from late afternoon to the overnight hours. Day 6 through 8, Sunday through Tuesday. Spread amongst forecast guidance increases late in the forecast period. However, general consensus is for weakening flow aloft and upper ridging building across the western U.S. Overall predictability is low for early next week. That's really it. Besides this and the moderate risk, there really is nothing else. Besides the slight risks for today, the slight risk for Thursday, and that's really it. So if you live in any of the colored regions that I showed in this video, please be prepared for severe weather. Especially be prepared for very strong to intense tornadoes tomorrow as well. So anyways, that is it. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Goodbye.